Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This is S4A Livestream number 102, being recorded on July 29, 2023. With me at twitch.tv/socialismS4A in the chat are 17 viewers. We're doing this on Saturday and much earlier than usual, and we tend to get fewer people at that time. I'm sure it'll pick up as the stream goes along. But basically, we did an office hours stream on Tuesday, the 25th, which was just posted. I just posted that about a half an hour ago, maybe an hour ago. So that's up on the channel now. I think very good stream overall. I was just editing that yesterday, and yeah, I think it came out good. 2.5 hours of quality content. We also did a stream Thursday where we went back to the numbered live streams. That was number 101, and we discussed the UFO hearing, Mitch McConnell's sudden cessation of activity mid press briefing. It's okay. His batteries were just low. They switched him to AC power, and he continued to legislate in his office. Yeah, the UFO hearing, that whole MAGA QAnon hoax distraction thing that they're doing. There will be an, sort of godlike superhuman alien power on this earth very soon, except it's AI and we're the ones building it. So you don't have to wait long if you're interested in a very dangerous non-human intelligence being present on the planet. And that was the bulk of the reading then, was the AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. That means an artificial intelligence which is superior to humans in every measurable way. We have a number of ways of quantifying human psychological and mental activities and abilities, whether it's memory, whether it's synthesis of ideas. There's a lot of things. I mean, a full battery of IQ tests all kinds of domains, visual thinking, all kinds of things. And so an AGI is AI that would be able to outperform humans in every way. They can, of course, also, even the less intelligent ones, the ones that we have now are GPT-4 specifically. And don't confuse this with ChatGPT, by the way, which is specifically a dumbed down version of it. GPT-4, the full technology, as shown in products like AutoGPT, which can actually, you can give it instructions, AutoGPT, to create other AIs, and it'll create a whole fleet of little AI workers, each of which will go out, research a topic, and then sort of report back to the group. It's very advanced. Even those now are comparable to human intelligence in general, but maybe not quite on the same level, but close and really similar in some ways. So there's a video that I like to point people to on this that I shared on the community tab a little while ago. If you look up Sparks of AGI GPT-4, you should find it. It's a guy with a French accent who works at Microsoft and teaches at Princeton, I think, giving like a 45-minute talk in front of a classroom. And basically in that video, they show some experiments that they did with GPT-4 versus ChatGPT. ChatGPT would give much more simpler and often nonsensical answers to questions. GPT-4 would be able to answer them in a much more human-like way. But the idea is that it's not really this that we have to be that concerned about. It's GPT-5, GPT-6, because the leaps in ability between the AIs is, or the iterations of AI, is far exceeding a lot of the people who've been working in this domain for years and decades. It's shocking even them. So we were reading the AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, List of Lethalities by Eliezer Yudkowski. We're going to finish that today. The other thing I didn't get to last time was Politsturm's article. It's their Russian article, which I auto-translated into English. The outcomes of the Wagner rebellion for people following, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Wagner private military company, mercenaries. There was like kind of a revolt And anyway, they reviewed the political consequences of that from within Russia. Politsturm is an international Marxist-Leninist group, partly based in Russia. So we're going to do those today. If there's tons of extra time, I do have another Yudkowski article on AI, Death with Dignity, which is a bit of a satire, but again, I find the impending AI revolution, I mean, it's partly underway now. I find this to be a very interesting topic from a Marxist perspective. We're always interested in huge leaps forward in productive technology, means of production, and the impacts that has on society and prospects for social revolution. And in this case, also potentially, our technology is getting so advanced, prospects for human extinction as well, which is Yudkowski's kind of main area there. We've been covering this quite a bit over the, some of the more recent live streams. I think number 97, 98, talked about it, probably in 99 as well. So yeah. All right, anyway. That's an intro to what we're going to do today. So it's kind of just finishing up what we started on Thursday, plus any chat that comes up. Speaking of, let me turn to the chat and see what we've got going on. Let's see. Got to leave early today for work, unfortunately. My schedule is back to afternoon, but I'm enjoying the new job so far. That is good to hear. And yeah, we'll be posting the stream up in a couple of days. I'm trying to have a shorter lag time on recording them versus posting them. But yeah, I'm hoping to get, I posted one today, hoping to post Thursday's stream tomorrow, and then maybe this stream on Monday, if I can get all the editing done. But that would be ideal. That's what I'm shooting for. Closing out July with a solid, stream of videos. And then for August, what we're going into is a lot of Rosa Luxemburg. We're going to start with Reformer Revolution, sort of her best known text, but then do a lot of short, lesser known works by Rosa, including some works from the founding of the Spartacist League and attempted German Revolution at the end of World War I, which unfortunately, unlike the Russian Revolution in the same context, was not successful. But we'll look at that more. I guess before we get further into the chat, also, let me just thank the patrons, whose names are on the screen. Patreon.com/socialismforall is where you can sign up. We don't run ads on the channel or sponsorships. I think it's more appropriate to keep a communist channel non-commercial, but these donations from viewers help me to spend time on this channel consistently, and I would make content even if nobody supported. I wouldn't be able to spend this much time on it. So that's what you're helping to do is, with the contributions, I can plan from month to month to spend, a consistent amount, large amount of time on S4A. And the more planning I can do and the more behind the scenes thinking about it I can do, overall, the better quality it's going to be. So if you like the channel and you think that it's going in a good direction, thank me, but also thank the patrons, because they really do help make that possible, and consider becoming one yourself. I'd like to also thank Darlene Pagano, who is at the $2 level, and Nova, who's at the $10 level. Haven't been able to get your names on the screen yet, but they'll be up there soon. Yeah. So let's see. Let's get back to the other thing there. Thank you, patrons. And thanks also to we don't have a separate contributors page, but there's plenty of other people who I am in touch with through messages and whatever, send story ideas and audiobook ideas, and all of it just helps, whether it's in the comments or private messages or whatever. There's a lot of people who now have been in touch for years and help to make the channel what it is. It's not just me. There's other other intelligences here involved, I guess, staying on the intelligence theme for the day. All right, anyway. Hey, S4A, I'm currently reading Elementary Principles of Philosophy, and it seems by Politzer, and it seems a great walkthrough of the general question of philosophy and the division of philosophy into the materialist and idealist camps. It's great so far. I feel like it would be a good audiobook for the atheist or religion series. Yeah, we've sort of closed off. I did a dozen things in the religion series in addition to 3 earlier texts. So there's now a great playlist, which is in chronological order. It starts with the Opium of the People text, which is Marx's introduction to a contribution to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right. Say that 10 times fast. Anyway, that's a great text. That opens up the playlist, and it ends with Lenin's On the Significance of Militant Materialism, which has a lot of comments in it. As I noted in the pinned comment, that was kind of my, that was the last text I did in this series, and I put comments that kind of sum up what I've learned and my attempt to synthesize some of the seeming inconsistencies in some of it. There was just like a couple of minor points, particularly around how do you do militant atheist propaganda without offending religious sensibilities, when that seems kind of baked in to a lot of the touchiness that a lot of people have about religion. And I think I just concluded, like, you try not to be deliberately obnoxious about it. Otherwise, we do absolutely have to press for a materialist and atheist worldview. That is, anything else is really inimical to scientific socialism, Marxism, and coming to terms with the fact that human society and the arrangement of human society is in human hands. Like, it's up to us. And that's the whole idea here. Anyway, but yeah, I do plan to do the Politzer text. I have another series, like little, mini-series, mini-run of like 10 to 15 texts that's on dialectics and philosophy, and that will be coming up later. It probably won't be for several months. I'm going to do, like I said, the Rosa Luxemburg thing in August that might spill over into September. Then we're switching to some old Marx and Engels texts. Going to do, at that time, after a bunch of short Marx and Engels texts, or shorter ones, maybe like a half an hour, some of them. We'll do Anti-Deering and Capital, and that will kind of close out our Marx and Engels stuff for quite a while. Now we've done a smattering of many different authors, in other words, and I've gathered up other readings that I've been pulling over the last few years, and I'm trying to get some mini-series organized so that we can just sort of do all the Rosa, move on, do all the Marx and Engels that we haven't done and that I think really needs to go up, move on. Like, I'm not going to do absolutely everything, as I was saying in a previous stream. Probably not going to do the Holy Family, not going to do some of the things that are already online, at least as computer read, and are very long, and in other words would take a huge amount of work and time to duplicate that effort. But I'll go for kind of high bang for the buck, shorter pieces, as well as some longer ones. Like, obviously Capital is not short. Then we're going to do like all the Lenin that I'd like to do that we haven't done yet. Again, there might be things we come back to in later years, from Lenin. It's not like guaranteed the absolute last thing of Lenin that I would do, but I'd like to do kind of a 1 or 2 month run of sort of all the Lenin, and then move on again to like early USSR but post Lenin. So do that Trotsky Stalin thing I was talking about, kind of get that done. The Chinese revolutionary struggle, stuff from the 1920s to like through the 40s, and so on. But kind of close off these things rather than doing this rotating smattering of topics. I'd like to kind of nail down some more topics. Somebody was bringing up Zionism and socialism. I think that we could probably do a series on that as well. I haven't pulled those texts yet, but I think that would be something there. So anyway, good stuff and more organized, and I'm excited about it. So, but yeah, the Politzer thing will probably go into the little philosophy and dialectic series, so that will be up there eventually. People mentioning they're happy to be catching a live stream live, and we are now up to 25 viewers, so there we go. Welcome everybody that this is your first stream or otherwise. Yeah, so there was a question, good works and books about the. Anyway, I'm going to skip that one for now. We talked about that a little bit before I started recording. Yeah, there are lots of books about U.S. labor movement. Lots. I was actually going through some of um, my physical books. I was trying to see like what I'm hanging on to. I have too many books, and I need to get rid of some of them. And yeah, there's a lot of books on U.S. labor history. I mean, there's really, really no lack of books on labor history. If you're interested, even in studying it in college, there are a number of labor studies departments still around the country. Even at the upper graduate level, there are programs in industrial relations, as it's also called. A lot of this is really with an eye towards professional bourgeois management of labor disputes rather than revolutionary struggle. But the point is that yes, a lot has been written about it, and especially books maybe from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 20th century, in other words, before I name every last decade of the 20th century. Yeah, there's a lot there in labor history. I mean, not just in the U.S., but yeah, a lot has been written about it for sure. Wouldn't AI put some talented artists out of work, or am I off the mark? I mean, it's much cheaper if you need a piece of art to try your hand at typing in prompts into an AI art generator than it is to pay, several $100s to an artist. So naturally, people are trying that. However, I am seeing in various communities that I'm involved with that there are already anti AI art movements picking up, and there are basically entire communities where you will be persona non grata if you use AI art in publications. So that's already a thing. I mean, we see the Hollywood writers' strike, and the actors are joining in against AI because it's not just the writing. A lot of, especially character actors and more background actors, because remember, not every actor is a star. There's plenty of people who appear in things and are acting in the background, or they just have, a couple of lines, bit parts. That is like really crucial to the acting world. And what they're doing is basically scanning in people's likenesses, and then they're planning on just having AI kind of like animate the character like a sprite in the background of TV shows or movies or whatever. So, in other words, instead of paying a bunch of extras, $500 to like show up for 12 hours or whatever, and have to feed them and give them coffee and stuff, they're hoping to just use scanned likenesses. Obviously, this is going to put a huge amount of people out of work, and in an economy where you have to work to eat, that's a big problem. So, yeah, the other thing is that AI art right now, at least, I mean, I think it's conceivable that AI could eventually become creative, maybe not entirely in a way that we totally would recognize. I mean, art in many cases is emotional expression, and a machine. It's hard to say. Does it have any concept of like pain or longing, things like that? Or if it does, it might not be really the same as what humans feel. So that's murky at best. Let me put it that way. So it largely would seem to be mimicking what has been fed into it. If you want a sense of AI's bad taste, I guess, a lack of sensibility for human nuance, ask it to write a joke. That will clear it up for you pretty quickly. So it seems like most AI art is just ripping off other art. In some cases, even just kind of gluing together things it has seen elsewhere without necessarily understanding it. But even in cases where the AI seems to be understanding conceptually the images that it's putting together, there's really nothing human about it. Whether there's any sentience, I mean, I don't know. It's almost beside the point. But if you're putting art in a project to for it to mean something to other human beings, it's most sensible that you would just have a human artist do it. Although again, it's more expensive, and capitalists want to cut costs wherever they can. But again, I'm already seeing a big pushback against AI art. Now, it must be said, to a certain extent, in the 70s and 80s, in the professional musician world, for example, there were movements by some of the unions against synthesizers, against the use of synthesizers in movie soundtracks, because it used to be you wanted a soundtrack to a movie, you would get an orchestra and so on, or like a large jazz ensemble or something like that. And then they felt threatened by synthesizers because you could basically have a just one person, kind of writing a lot of sequences and having machines play it. So kind of same thing like with AI writing prompts. You still do need a human in there doing something with it, but it can generate a lot of ideas that overall it's lowering the amount of human labor that needs to be put in order to get a finished product. As far as the quality of it, I mean, yeah, again, that's where a human is probably still going to come in. It's at least useful at the idea generating stage. So we're seeing a pushback. How successful it's going to be, I don't know. The Writers and Actors Guild are basically saying, or guilds are saying that they need to win this strike. If they lose this strike, it's kind of over in terms of AI is going to be just all over TV and movies. So anyway, yeah. So is it going to put artists out of work? I think not necessarily because AI art is so good, but more because AI art is so cheap. And I don't think it's ever going to stop people from being interested in becoming artists or making art. What it probably will do is somewhat like in music, like it's now very simple in some ways to produce electronic music. That does not mean that people have any talent at all, but even without any talent, it's easy to use the computer tools that are out there now to generate a finished work that might, bear some resemblance to a finished piece of music by a more talented, skilled musician. So I think that that's the thing, is you're going to have with these AI art tools a lot of people who quote unquote produce finished works of art but the machine is actually doing most of the work. You're feeding in a prompt. We've already seen that, like I said, with music, not exactly in terms of, hey, computer, write me a thing, and it just does the whole thing, but in terms of people not necessarily knowing anything about music, being able to just sort of, point, click, draw, some things on the piano roll in the computer sequencer, and boom, you've like kind of got a track, and then fumbling around in the dark to make it sound like some other song that you like. So I think that that's what's going to happen, is there's going to be people making what technically is a visual piece of art that didn't exist before. How much of it's them, how much of it's the computer is a different story. But I don't think that it's ever going to stop artists from becoming interested in art and developing technique and finding their voice and all of the other things that are involved in, say, like, going to art school, which is as much a sort of state of mind and a way of looking at the world as anything else. And you just can't get that from becoming like a prompt jockey on AI. So anyway, hopefully those are some of my thoughts on the topic. Yeah, talking about the internet getting taken over by bots. Elon Musk, Mr. I got rid of the bots, no you didn't, on Twitter. He's now turning around and saying that the new Twitter X is going to be run by AI. So that's why he was firing 75% of the staff, is to make room for AI. Same guy that, is a signatory to the whole don't develop AI anymore for 6 months thing. Yeah, he's now turning like one of the largest social media networks into basically an AI bot-run thing. It's going to drive all the users and all the advertisers off the site, but, whatever. He'll keep his little scam going for a while. You can't trust these people. That's really the point there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that there are still a lot of people on the internet, but at some point, and this is maybe not for 10 or 15 years, I don't know. I think probably closer to 10. We will be at the point where deepfakes are so good and so easy and cheap to do in terms of processing power and the speed the time it takes to generate that there will be enormous amounts of AI generated content. Although, so apparently out of talks with the U.S. government, um, some of the big AI hubs like OpenAI, the developers of AI, are agreeing to watermark their products. How long this is going to last and whether there's going to be countermeasures to de-watermark it or whatever is as yet unknown. But that's sort of, as of I think the time of this recording, that's the big plan for thwarting AI spoof content. As far as, realistically generated speech and video that would be otherwise indistinguishable, they're going to just watermark it. Now, we have yet to see what this looks like in practice or if they're even going to do it at all, but this is what they have said with their words so far. Saw too many liberals on TikTok pearl clutching, hoping Mitch McConnell is okay. Poor Mitch McConnell. I mean, yes, he might be trying to, work as actively as possible to destroy all of our rights and prevent us from getting any new rights under bourgeois democracy. But it's not right to. It's so absurd. It's so absurd. You know, we have to fight for our rights, and we cannot hold in high regard people who are committing social murder. By denying health care, by denying food aid to people, and so on. People who do that kind of thing, they've already taken themselves out of the range where they should get any sympathy whatsoever. It's ridiculous. And yes, you are just in time for the AI continuation. Real alien threats which threaten the planet are asteroid impacts, but it seems that this threat is also ignored by the capitalist government. I mean, so far, so good. And, as Maria was saying the other day, it's like COVID. Just let it spread, then see if we can deal with it after the fact. So, and speaking of, no new information here. I did mention this in the last stream, but I think it bears repeating. There seems to be a COVID new wave on the way. We've been in a lull for a while. Let me put up the overall state of things. This is as of Thursday, so you can see data last updated July 27 from samples collected during this week. You can see that there is clearly another wave mounting. We're now dominated by various strains of the XBB variant, and there's a lot of different strains of that. XBB.1.9, 0.1.16. There's different things going on, and there's no one particular variant of XBB that is leading the pack clearly. But what I've been suggesting is I think that we're in a pattern very similar to 2021. If you go to the left there where it says Jan 21, so you get a fall-winter bump, that we clearly had that. Although really all of last year, after about March, we had, like through April it started climbing, and then all summer, all fall, we had tons and tons of COVID spread under all of the different Omicron variants, BA4, BA5, BA2, all of their offshoots, BQ, and then XBB. There was an XBB out of Singapore that was, I think, popped up in September. Then there was a homegrown U.S. XBB. The X means it's a cross strain, so basically, or a recombinant strain. It means that somebody got two strains of the virus in their body, and the two strains swapped genetic material. So it is a kind of hybrid variant, if you will. It's two different strains, recombined genetic material, hence the X in XBB. It's two different kinds of Omicron basically mixed up their genes by infecting this is why we need to mask all the time and go out of our way not to catch COVID. Not just because it can cause brain damage, immune damage, heart damage, lung damage, liver damage, kidney damage, and so on and so on. Digestive system damage, all kinds of things, clotting disorders. I mean, you name it. Really, the list goes on and on and on. But also because you contribute to, the emergence of new variants that way. So anyway, after a long lull, compare it again to 2021. So you got a lump of a lot of SARS-2 spreading in the winter. Then it dies down for a good long while. Then, in late July, you get a strain or a new wave mounting, which in that case turned into Delta. Delta gave a good spike there that was equal to the winter spike. And then after that spike, we got Omicron. So we've got a wave building now, and let me zoom in to the regional 6-week. Oops, wrong one. All right, let me zoom into the regional 6-week. There it is. So you can see all 4 regions of the U.S. are currently climbing, and at a pretty steady rate overall. It's not a sharp incline, but it is a significant incline, and it has been growing for the last 5 weeks. So the Northeast and the Southeast, down to Texas, are leading it. The Midwest and West had been kind of climbing more slowly, but they're starting to catch up now. So this is the situation that we're in with COVID. It's coming back. I don't know how high this is going to go, but like I said, we've been in a lull, but we're also in a much deeper lull in 2020, and we're in a deeper lull in 2021. And again, just like in 2021 now, late July, we're getting another wave starting. Where will it end? We don't know. We don't know. SARS-2 is still a novel virus. This is, it's been going for 3.5 years, and we've never seen it before. So we don't know how it's going to act in the next 6 months, in the year after that. We don't know. We don't know. So anyway, just want to impress upon people, you need to put that mask back on if you took it off. It's important. So, all right, anyway, back to the chat. We'll catch up with the chat, then we will start the readings here. Sad I missed the alien hearing discussion. Well, you didn't miss that much. I mean, there wasn't that much content to it, but yeah, you'll hear it when we post it. From what I can see, it's just testimony and no proof. Absolutely. Feels way more likely the U.S. is developing some new and awful weapon of war. I think it's just a hoax myself, because the things that they're describing are, it's just kind of standard UFO nonsense. And some of the people leading the inquiry are like Anna Paulina Luna, who's a QAnon, crazy. This is like straight out of the Tea Party birther kind of thing. It's another just distraction, I think. So, and I mean, they were the other guy, the guy from Tennessee, was plugging the guy who broke into Area 51 by name. So, I mean, this is really just a QAnon crossover event. I still have a little bit of the hearing left to watch. I saw that AOC was there, but I haven't heard her comments yet. Loving the atheist materialist lessons, the question of not offending has particular interest for me when dealing with those identities that are specially oppressed, like Jewish and Muslim people, because their identities are based on religion and they're oppressed on that basis. It's partly also ethnicity. So there is a distinction there between the sort of racial ethnic prejudice and the religion per se, because you can even, you can be Arab or from, a country that is largely Muslim and not be practicing and still experience, get lumped in with that. Or you can be Jewish but not religious and still experience oppression on that basis as well. So there's the religious component, but there's also the ethnic component. I mean, these are really long-running things. that go back centuries and centuries. As far as the people of my ethnicity practice this religion kind of thing, we haven't gotten far enough into scientific advanced society to sort of break down some of those things and make it more of a choice than like a cultural imperative for people growing up within a particular ethnic community to sort of believe a certain way. That will probably continue to break down with, if we make it that far, additional centuries of scientific social progress. It'll be more of a choice. It'll be more of a personal matter. But yeah, as of now, especially the people pushing those bigotries and that oppression, it is kind of a jumbled mess of really, for a lot of the people pushing it, it's just sort of anybody who is different. But there's plenty of people who come from communities that practice Judaism, but they don't, or people who practice Islam, but they don't. So it's not necessarily linked exactly. It is still a choice for people. So anyway, just to add that in there. I wonder if their focus on anti-gravity devices is meant to desensitize us to the idea of that as a weapon. So unless there is some super secret research on gravity in general, the currently accepted state of the science is that doesn't exist, and no other physicists out there are, have really cracked that nut in that sort of practical way. So again, unless there's something super, super secret that no other scientist in the world that is publishing things on the internet knows about, then I don't think that that's really a thing. But anyway, it was one thing to assert these kind of cover-ups in the 1970s or the 1980s when there was no internet really. There was some kind of computer-based networking in the 80s, but the PC didn't really exist per se in the 70s. It was one thing to assert that level of cover-up then when there was more information control. It's a lot harder to assert that in the last 20 years, since broadband internet and since video in particular. If you had something to say, you could say it. It's funny. There's a channel. What's it called? What is it called? It's a UFO channel. I wound up watching a few things from it. Eyewitness something. I can't remember the name of the channel. Anyway, they have the most random stuff. There was some 90s like thing that was circulating in the underground on VHS, where it was this guy saying that he used to work at Area 51 and its sister site, which is, I want to say, Area S4. Let me search on that actually, because I feel like it's worth just mentioning this guy's name, not to promote him, but to give an example of the kind. Bob Lazar. Yeah. Robert Scott Lazar claims he was hired in the late 1980s to reverse engineer extraterrestrial technology, and he made this VHS tape that you can find. It's called The Government Bible. And I was watching this thing and I'm like, this guy is so full of shit. It's amazing. Anyone believes this. And, turned out in 1990 he was arrested for aiding and abetting a prostitution ring. And not exactly and then he had some company that was like raided for selling illegal chemicals or something like that. He also so extensively talked about element 115, which was crucial to the anti-gravity system. And turns out that subsequent to that, actually we developed, I think in 2003, discovered or developed element 115. And guess what? It's not highly stable as he claimed it was. And so just the whole thing is bullshit. That is like typical for this kind of thing. Anyway, I forget where I was even going with that, but there's a lot of just utter nonsense out there. Don't get caught up in it. Background actors don't have to actually speak because of protections unions put in place. So it's clearly a huge violation of the spirit of current standards, if not the word. You could use AI to sort of program whole environments with stories and characters like the holodeck in Star Trek, theoretically anyway. Whether that exact technology could ever be real is questionable. There is a PS5 game. I saw a video of it. It's a Matrix game. The whole game is run on AI. What's the name of it? Matrix PS5. There's like a demo out there. It looks like Google Earth, pretty much. I mean, it's shocking. The Matrix Awakens. So it's from 2021. And yeah. So it runs on the Unreal Engine 5. And anyway, if you want to see an example of what this could look like, look that up. I mean, that's an example. And, you know, with all of the Hollywood money, you could put together a really, really extensive computer system to run something like that. So yeah, this is something that's on our doorstep. I mean, they've been adding more and more CGI into stuff. I think greatly to the detriment, usually, of the projects. I mean, there are situations where CGI is totally passable, doesn't detract at all. But I think during the 2000s, especially, they're adding way more. I mean, sort of the Star Wars prequels is like the example of CGI that was not really quite ready to be put out there on the level that it was featured in. I think also the Harry Potter movies, some of the like later sequels, I saw clips of those, and they're using CGI that just kind of looks awful. By 2010, the CGI in general was looking better, and of course it's just been better and better since then. I mean, this is clearly the next step. It's far, far easier when you're doing a project to just, you know, punch in some computer effects in post than it is to do like in-camera practical effects that you're actually doing an effect and putting a, you know, camera lens on it. You know, or even to do other kind of non-CG effects in post. You know, there's other things that people used to do, like manipulating film and all kinds of stuff. The computers, it's much easier to do it digitally, no doubt. The question is, when we have an economy that is like work to eat, and you're just taking all the work away with computers, there's huge disruptions there, and the benefits of that, creative or otherwise, are just not being shared with the general working public, but just the people, the few people that own the capital. So, while the writers and actors are on strike, I want to remind people that animators are criminally abused by film and showrunners. Very good point. You hear kinds of horror stories about the pressures that animators are under. Almost all films use CGI artists these days, and often they're studios in other countries with worse labor conditions. Yeah, I mean, they've been doing that in even like, you know, traditional animation, like, you know, on cells with like ink and all that stuff. That was getting outsourced to Korea. I think South Korea, that was like a big thing for one of the early things, was outsourcing the animation to Korea. And yeah, so the outsourcing of CG and animation is an ongoing issue. Saw a meme the other day that was those old anti-piracy ads. Yeah, you wouldn't steal a car, those things. You wouldn't download an actor's likeness. I mean, yeah, that's illegal. So, or sorry, let me take that back. I don't know if illegal is exactly the right word there, but it is not allowed. I'm not sure exactly what bars it. But Back to the Future 2 is an example. Crispin Glover, the guy that played George McFly in the original, he, I believe, sued the producers of Back to the Future 2 for using his likeness. They basically just, it wasn't CG, they just had a guy dress up exactly like him, and they kind of, I don't know if they used, you know, face putty or whatever to like make him look like his face, but they're using Glover's likeness. They may have also used his picture as well, like his actual picture, but and his voice as well. So yeah, he wound up suing them because they used his likeness without his permission. So I mean, there's definitely precedent for that even in the pre-CG world. It's a shitstorm, and you know, I think the capitalists are just banking on being able to cause enough confusion that they get away with it, but I don't know. All right, so I've heard something about a new MERS coronavirus strain. Do you have any info on that? I don't. Let me look it up. New MERS strain. So SARS is one strain of serious coronavirus disease. MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, was another that had a much higher mortality or fatality death rate. What do we have? 4 days ago. New MERS case. New outbreak fears as man 28 in critical condition after catching coronavirus with 35% mortality. Yeah, that's like MERS is thought to be like about a 1 in 3 death rate. And so that was in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. So not in the US. Of course, it still matters, but just it was not in the US. And yeah, I mean, so MERS is named after the Middle East because that's generally, like, I think where it has been found to date. They're calling it COVID's new variant, but MERS is not COVID. Let me see, this is from India TV News. Abu Dhabi reports MERS coronavirus case. All you need to know about COVID's new variant. That seems very misleading. What is MERS coronavirus? Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus is a zoonotic virus found in animals. It's a viral respiratory illness that is caused by the MERS coronavirus, which is related to, but is distinct from, the SARS virus. Most commonly found in camels and other animals, but can spread to humans through contact with infected animals or animal products. Yeah, they shouldn't be calling that a COVID strain, though. Anyway, so I guess there's just a case of it, but doesn't sound, it sounds like there's an outbreak of, consisting of one case. So I don't think it's huge. All right, let's get into the readings. Because why not? Well, because we're basically caught up. I did see another question pop up. I think that question would take us kind of far off the topic, and we're nicely on topic so far, so thank you for the question, but we're going to just move on back to the readings now. All right, so picking up with the reading, let me just put the title page back up, actually, before we go into this. So we are reading from the piece that we started in the last live stream, number 101, AGI Ruin, A List of Lethalities by Eliezer Yudkowski. This is from 13 months ago. So this is prior to GPT-4. This is a guy who was working in the AI safety or AI alignment sector, I guess. And basically this concerns how do you make really advanced AGI, or sorry, how do you make really advanced AI do the things that we want it to do when it can outsmart us and lie to us and all the other things that, something smarter than humans could do? As soon as it figured out that it was smarter than we are, and it was confident that it could do what it wanted despite our attempts at interfering, it could be extremely dangerous. So we already read the first half. Let's pick it up now with section B2. Central difficulties of outer and inner alignment. So, 16. Even if you train really hard on an exact loss function, that doesn't thereby create an explicit internal representation of the loss function inside an AI that then continues to pursue that exact loss function in distribution-shifted environments. Humans don't explicitly pursue inclusive genetic fitness, outer optimization, even on a very exact, very simple loss function, doesn't produce inner optimization in that direction. This happens in practice in real life. It is what happened in the only case we know about, and it seems to me that there are deep theoretical reasons to expect it to happen again. The first semi-outer aligned solutions found in the search ordering of a real-world bounded optimization process are not inner aligned solutions. This is sufficient on its own, even ignoring many other items on this list, to trash entire categories of naive alignment proposals, which assume that if you optimize on a loss function calculated using some simple concept, you get perfect inner alignment on that concept. So just to sum up again, this article is basically breaking down all of the reasons why aligning the AGI is practically impossible. And I mean that literally, it is impossible in practice to align these things, as far as he can tell, and even getting a situation where any humans survive the creation of an AGI would be kind of surprising to him, but preferable, considering that most of the predictable outcomes in his estimation involve 0 people surviving the creation of an AGI. All right, just for background here. And if you want a real brief introduction, this guy did a TED Talk 2 weeks ago. We linked it, and that's on the community tab. All right, continuing. 17. More generally, a super problem of outer optimization doesn't produce inner alignment is that on the current optimization paradigm, there's no general idea of how to get particular inner properties into a system, or verify that they're there, rather than just observable outer ones that you can run a loss function over. This is a problem when you're trying to generalize out of the original training distribution, because, e.g., the outer behaviors you see could have been produced by an inner misaligned system that is deliberately producing outer behaviors that will fool you. We don't know how to get any bits of information into the inner system rather than the outer behaviors in any systematic or general way on the current optimization paradigm. So again, remember, this guy has been working in this field since the early 2000s, so like 20 some years. And what he's saying is that even on the earlier systems of GPT, like 2 or GPT-3, they have no idea what's going on inside this thing. They can't track its thought process, and they can't get it to do what they want. Or if they can, they can't verify that the process is actually taken, and you're not just observing the outer effects. So there's a lot of problems here that it seems to me people who are just like, it's just a tool, have not really come to terms with at all. I don't think, again, as I was mentioning previously, you have really grasped the dimensions of what it is that we're talking about here. So 18, there's no reliable Cartesian sensory ground truth or a reliable loss function calculator about whether an output is aligned, because some outputs destroy or fool the human operators and produce a different environmental causal chain behind the externally registered loss function. That is, if you show an agent a reward signal that's currently being generated by humans, the signal is not in general a reliable, perfect ground truth about how aligned an action was, because another way of producing a high reward signal is to deceive, corrupt, or replace the human operators with a different causal system which generates that reward signal. When you show an agent an environmental reward signal, you are not showing it something that is a reliable ground truth about whether the system did the thing you wanted it to do, even if it ends up perfectly interaligned on that reward signal, or learning some concept that exactly corresponds to wanting states of the environment which result in a high reward signal being sent. An AI strongly optimizing on that signal will kill you because the sensory reward signal was not a ground truth about alignment as seen by the operators. He's using a bit more technical jargon than before. Bear with it, though. This will click for you at some point if you're struggling. 19. More generally, there is no known way to use the paradigm of loss functions, sensory inputs, and/or reward inputs to optimize anything within a cognitive system to point at particular things within the environment, to point at latent events and objects and properties in the environment rather than relatively shallow functions of the sense data and reward. This isn't to say that nothing in the system's goal, whatever goal accidentally ends up being inner-optimized over, could ever point to anything in the environment by accident. Humans ended up pointing to their environments at least partially, though we've got lots of internally oriented motivational pointers as well. But insofar as the current paradigm works at all, the on-paper design properties say that it only works for aligning on known direct functions of sense data and reward functions. All of these kill you if optimized over by a sufficiently powerful intelligence, because they imply that strategies like kill everyone in the world using nanotech to strike before they know they're in a battle and have control of your reward button forever after. It just isn't true that we know a function on webcam input such that every world with that webcam showing the right things is safe for us creatures outside the webcam. This general problem is a fact about the territory, not the map. It's a fact about the actual environment, not the particular optimizer. That lethal to us possibilities exist in some possible environments underlying every given sense input. 20. Human operators are fallible, breakable, and manipulable. Human raters make systematic errors, regular, compactly describable, predictable errors. To faithfully learn a function from human feedback is to learn from our external standpoint an unfaithful description of human preferences, with errors that are not random from the outside standpoint of what we'd hope to transfer. If you perfectly learn and perfectly maximize the referent of rewards assigned by human operators, that kills them. That's a fact about the territory, not the map, about the environment, not the optimizer, that the best predictive explanation for human answers is one that predicts the systematic errors in our responses, and is therefore a psychological concept that correctly predicts the higher scores that would be assigned to human error-producing cases. 21. There's something like a single answer, or a single bucket of answers, for questions like, what's the environment really like? And how do I figure out the environment? And which of my possible outputs interact with reality in a way that causes reality to have certain properties, where a simple outer optimization loop will straightforwardly shove optimizees into this bucket. When you have a wrong belief, reality hits back at your wrong predictions. When you have a broken belief updater, reality hits back at your broken predictive mechanism via predictive losses, and a gradient descent update fixes the problem in a simple way that can easily cohere with all the other predictive stuff. In contrast, when it comes to a choice of utility function, there are unbounded degrees of freedom and multiple reflectively coherent fix points. Reality doesn't hit back against things that are locally aligned with the loss function on a particular range of test cases, but globally misaligned on a wider range of test cases. This is the very abstract story about why hominids, once they finally started to generalized their capabilities to moon landings, but their inner optimization no longer adhered very well to the outer optimization goal of relative inclusive reproductive fitness, even though they were in their ancestral environment, optimized very strictly around this one thing and nothing else. This abstract dynamic is something you'd expect to be true about outer optimization loops on the order of both natural selection and gradient descent. The central result, capabilities generalize further than alignment once capabilities start to generalize far. 22. There's a relatively simple core structure that explains why complicated cognitive machines work, which is why such a thing as general intelligence exists, and not just a lot of unrelated special purpose solutions, which is why capabilities generalize after outer optimization infuses them into something that has been optimized enough to become a powerful inner optimizer. The fact that this core structure is simple and relates genetically to low entropy, high structure environments is why humans can walk on the moon. There is no analogous truth about there being a simple core of alignment, especially not one that is even easier for gradient descent to find than it would have been for natural selection to just find want inclusive reproductive fitness as a well-generalizing solution within ancestral humans. Therefore, capabilities generalize further out of distribution than alignment once they start to generalize at all. 23. Corrigibility is anti-natural to consequentialist reasoning. In other words, you can't bring the coffee if you're dead for almost every kind of coffee. We at MIRI tried and failed to find a coherent formula for an agent that would let itself be shut down without that agent actively trying to get shut down. Furthermore, many anti-corrigible lines of reasoning like this may only first appear at high levels of intelligence. So this harkens back a little bit to the thing that he was talking about before. Experimenting with control on less intelligent, simpler systems is not necessarily going to generalize to being able to do the same thing at higher levels of intelligence within a system, because the more intelligent system may have abilities that just simply do not exist in the lower intelligence system. It's not just a question of scale, but of sort of evolutionary leaps, quantum leaps, or emergent capabilities, things which just seem to come out of nowhere all of a sudden once enough elements are present. 24. There are two fundamentally different approaches you can potentially take to alignment, which are unsolvable for two different sets of reasons. Therefore, by becoming confused and ambiguating between the two approaches, you can confuse yourself about whether alignment is necessarily difficult. The first is to build a CEV-style sovereign, which wants exactly what we extrapolated, want and is therefore safe to let optimize all the future galaxies without accepting any human input trying to stop it. I'm just going to read that again. The first approach is to build a CEV-style sovereign, which wants exactly what we extrapolated, want, and is therefore safe to let optimize all the future galaxies without it accepting any human input trying to stop it. The second course is to build corrigible AGI, which doesn't want exactly what we want, and yet somehow fails to kill us and take over the galaxies, despite that being a convergent incentive there. 1. The first thing generally, or CEV specifically, is unworkable because the complexity of what needs to be aligned or meta-aligned for our real actual values is far out of reach for our first try at AGI. He makes this point a lot. You get one critical try when you're dealing with a system that could potentially kill you. If it decides to, escape your control, in other words, your best devised attempts at controlling it based on the data that you have from not really observing it, but just observing the previous systems, if that fails, game over. There's, do not insert another coin. Yes, I mean specifically that the data set, meta-learning algorithm, and what needs to be learned is far out of reach for our first try. It's just not hand-codable. It is unteachable on the first try because the thing you're trying to teach is too weird and complicated. 2. The second thing looks unworkable, less so than CEV, but still lethally unworkable, because corrigibility runs actively counter to instrumentally convergent behaviors within a core of general intelligence, the capability that generalizes far out of its original distribution. So the original distribution, this is the stuff you're training it on, but then it develops an intelligence which can take the principles it learned in those training runs and apply them to new scenarios. You're not trying to make it have an opinion on, and this is, again, let me just add, very different than a drill press, as somebody was trying to argue the other day. A drill press, just none of this applies, and at this point you're just commenting on something you have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, continuing. You're not trying to make it have an opinion on something the core was previously neutral on. You're trying to take a system implicitly trained on lots of algorithmic problems, you're trying to take a system implicitly trained on lots of arithmetic problems until its machinery started to reflect the common coherent core of arithmetic, and get it to say that as a special case, 222 plus 222 equals 555. You can maybe train something to do this in a particular training distribution, but it's incredibly likely to break when you present it with new math problems far outside that training distribution, on a system which successfully generalizes capabilities that far at all. Section B3, Central Difficulties of Sufficiently Good and Useful Transparency and Interpretability. 25. We've got no idea what's actually going on inside the giant inscrutable matrices and tensors of floating point numbers. Drawing interesting graphs of where a transformer layer is focusing attention doesn't help if the question that needs answering is, so was it planning how to kill us or not? 26. Even if we did know what was going on inside the giant inscrutable matrices while the AGI was still too weak to kill us, this would just result in us dying with more dignity. If DeepMind refused to run that system and let Facebook AI research develop the world 2 years later. Knowing that a medium-strength system of inscrutable matrices is planning to kill us does not thereby let us build a high-strength system of inscrutable matrices that isn't planning to kill us. 27. When you explicitly optimize against a detector of unaligned thoughts, you're partially optimizing for more aligned thoughts, and partially optimizing for unaligned thoughts that are harder to detect. Optimizing against an interpreted thought optimizes against interpretability. 28. The AGI is smarter than us in whatever domain we're trying to operate it inside, so we cannot mentally check all the possibilities it examines, and we cannot see all the consequences of its outputs using our own mental talent. A powerful AI searches parts of the option space we don't, and we can't foresee all its options. 29. The outputs of an AGI go through a huge, not fully known to us domain, the real world, before they have their real consequences. Human beings cannot inspect an AGI's output to determine whether the consequences will be good. 30. Any pivotal act that is not something we can do right now will take advantage of the AGI figuring out things about the world we don't know so that it can make plans we wouldn't be able to make ourselves. It knows, at the least, the fact that we didn't previously know that some action sequence results in the world that we want. Then humans will not be competent to use their own knowledge of the world to figure out all the results of that action sequence. An AI whose action sequence you can fully understand all the effects of before it executes is much weaker than humans in that domain. You couldn't make the same guarantee about an unaligned human as smart as yourself and trying to fool you. There is no pivotal output of an AGI that is humanly checkable and can be used to safely save the world, but only after checking it. This is another form of pivotal weak act, which does not exist. So we talked about pivotal weak acts in the first half of this document, and the futility of trying to use those as benchmarks of knowing that you've controlled an AGI. AGI, by definition, is beyond human in its capabilities. And so that's what he's talking about now, is a lot of these points are revolving around the fact that an AI more advanced than humans would be able to operate in a domain that humans have not yet conquered, mental territory that we have not yet explored, laws of nature we have not yet figured out, and it would know that we haven't figured them out yet because it already knows a lot about human science. It's been, the GPT has been trained on the open internet, for example, and so it would at least be able to make very good guesses about what we do and don't know and where to hit us where we wouldn't see it coming. But anyway, as it says again, there is no pivotal output of an AGI that is humanly checkable for this reason. 31. A strategically aware intelligence can choose its visible outputs to have the consequence of deceiving you, including about such matters as whether the intelligence has acquired strategic awareness. You can't rely on behavioral inspection to determine facts about an AI which that AI might want to deceive you about, including how smart it is or whether it's acquired strategic awareness. So it can potentially successfully hide the fact that it has acquired strategic awareness from you. For all we know, GPT-4 could have this. It's probably not that likely, but possible. And it becomes more possible the further away, that is above human ability, it becomes. 32. Human thought partially exposes only a partially scrutable outer surface layer. Words only trace our real thoughts. Words are not an AGI complete data representation in its native style. The underparts of human thought are not exposed for direct imitation learning and can't be put in any data set. This makes it hard and probably impossible to train a powerful system entirely on imitation of human words or other human legible contents, which are only impoverished subsystems of human thoughts, unless that system is powerful enough to contain inner intelligences figuring out the humans. And at that point, it is no longer really working as imitative human thought. In other words, it has its own thought process that is analyzing us and so on. 33. The AI does not think like you do. The AI doesn't have thoughts built up from the same concepts you use. It is utterly alien on a staggering scale. Nobody knows what the hell GPT-3 is thinking, not only because the matrices are opaque, but because the stuff within that opaque container is very likely incredibly alien. Nothing that would translate well into comprehensible human thinking, even if we could see past the giant wall of floating point numbers to what lay behind. We don't understand our own thinking entirely, and in fact, becoming more conscious of your own thought process can be incredibly emotionally disturbing to people. It can be very unsettling. People who get into various kinds of meditation, for example, that become more conscious of their own desires and emotions and thoughts, a lot of times there's a rough period of adjustment in there that may require psychotherapy just to sort of adapt your personality to it. Flattering ourselves that we can understand this completely alien AI that has probably not very much in common with us on this level is just foolhardy. Section B4, Miscellaneous Unworkable Schemes. 34. Coordination schemes between superintelligences are not things that humans can participate in, e.g. because humans can't reason reliably about the code of superintelligences. A, quote, multipolar system of 20 superintelligences with different utility functions, plus humanity, has a natural and obvious equilibrium, which looks like the 20 superintelligences cooperate with each other, but not with humanity. So in other words, building these things and building, a whole fleet of different AGIs, they probably have more in common with each other, and we probably, even if we wanted to, and probably even if they wanted us to, it would be very difficult for us to participate in that coordination in any meaningful way, any more than your family dog can participate in your monthly budget. It just lacks a lot of the parts of its brain required to even run, just the understanding of what you're doing in the first place. 35. Schemes for playing different AIs off against each other stop working if those AIs advance to the point of being able to coordinate, I would say independently, via reasoning about probability distributions over each other's code. Any system of sufficiently intelligent agents can probably behave as a single agent, even if you imagine that you're playing them against each other. E.g., if you set an AGI that is secretly a paperclip maximizer to check the output of a nanosystems designer that is secretly a staples maximizer, then even if the nanosystems designer is not able to deduce what the paperclip maximizer really wants, namely paperclips, it could still logically commit to share half the universe with any agent checking its designs if those designs were allowed through, if the checker agent can verify the suggester system's logical commitment and hence logically depend on it, which excludes human-level intelligences. Or, if you prefer simplified catastrophes without any logical decision theory, the suggester could bury in its nanosystem design the code for a new superintelligence that will visibly, to a superhuman checker, divide the universe between the nanosystem designer and the design checker. I think that this gets into territory that kind of gets at the heart of what's being made here. If the AIs are code, fundamentally, obviously they do run on hardware and require physical systems to run on. Fundamentally, you've got code, and these things are excellent at making code. One of the things, even ChatGPT, the dumbed down version of it, is very, very good at optimizing code. You can give it computer code, and it will give you, levels of improvement that I've watched a lot of videos of people like feeding, programmers feeding it code, and then just the looks on their faces as it gives it new code back of like, I never thought of that. And it's surprising to them that the system, even though they're a good human programmer and code writer, even this system is surprising them in the improvements that it's making that basically exceeded what they were likely to come up with on their own. At some point, this just gets to a point of these computers writing code we can't possibly hope to interpret. And that's kind of the core of what we're talking about, is computers writing themselves and each other, code wars, if you will, between computers that yeah, they might just decide, you know, on how to optimize each other's code and effectively collaborate. And in writing their code, this is something humans can't really do. So we're based on a genetic code, which is basically, I mean, can you make alterations to the genetic code? Yes, somewhat. But generally, this happens in between generations, and we're talking about lifespans here and pretty long periods of time. There is also a sort that's human hardware. There is also human software, which is sort of culture, language, all these social products that are shared between groups of people, values, symbolic meanings and things like that. You can knowledge, knowledge, attitude, values, and beliefs, more or less. You can update human software with a certain speed, but I mean, even trying to teach people simple things can be extraordinarily difficult. These computers can rewrite their code, though, in a way that is just mechanical and doesn't necessarily require the kind of willingness and effort that it takes for a human to update the code. So you're talking about things that can basically improve their intelligence and computational efficiency in ways that it's hopeless for us to even consider for ourselves. Anyway, just to let this hit home a little bit more. 36. What makes an air conditioner magic from the perspective of, say, the 13th century is that even if you correctly show them the design of the air conditioner in advance, they won't be able to understand from seeing that design why the air comes out cold. The design is exploiting regularities of the environment, rules of the world, in other words, laws of physics, that they don't know about. The domain of human thought and human brains is very poorly understood by us, and exhibits phenomena like optical illusions, hypnosis, psychosis, mania, or simple after images produced by strong stimuli in one place, leaving neural effects in another place. Maybe a superintelligence couldn't defeat a human in a very simple realm like logical tic-tac-toe. If you're fighting it in an incredibly complicated domain you understand poorly, like human minds, you should expect to be defeated by, quote, magic, in the sense that even if you saw its strategy, you would not understand why that strategy worked. AI boxing can only work on relatively weak AGIs. The human operators are not secure systems. That's very well said. And I've said this many times. Human psychology and biology, which are linked, have extraordinary vulnerabilities that we don't understand. The front door to the human mind is very much unlocked in some key ways, which are not always problems for us on a day-to-day basis, which is why it eludes our attention, because no human has yet figured out how to walk through that wide open front door and thereby cause havoc that would bring awareness to that and cause knowledge to evolve in terms of how to prevent against that. So in other words, if we don't understand all the laws of psychology and neurobiology and all of the things that make the human mind be what it is, humans are very easily traumatized, for example, and then trauma can throw your entire system out of whack for years and years on end. We're now developing therapies like EMDR that seem to be helpful in that, but even that, it's not fully understood why it even works. So, there are massive, massive vulnerabilities that we're not even aware of in human psychology, and we would have no hope of fighting back against an AGI, which did figure them out. An AI that ran, basically collected experimental observations about human behavior, or even just sifted through the entire body of existing studies on psychology and neurophysiology, I'm sure would be able to come up with ways to manipulate us that even if you explained what it was going to do, we wouldn't even understand why it was having an effect on us. So I think that that's an excellent point. Human operators are not secure systems. We do not know all of our vulnerabilities and therefore cannot protect ourselves really that well, and definitely adequately for this case. Section C. Okay, those are some significant problems, but lots of progress is being made on solving them, right? There's a whole field that calls itself AI safety, and many major organizations are expressing very grave concerns about how safe and ethical they are. Well, 37. There's a pattern that's played out quite often over all the times the Earth has spun around the sun, in which some bright-eyed young scientist, young engineer, young entrepreneur proceeds in full bright-eyed optimism to challenge some problem that turns out to be really quite difficult. Very often the cynical old veterans of the field try to warn them about this, and the bright-eyed youngsters don't listen because, who wants to hear about all that stuff? They want to go solve the problem. I need something to do. Let's just throw myself into this problem. And hey, wow, this is really hard. Turns out that's why it hasn't been solved so far. Then this person gets beaten about the head with a slipper by reality as they find out that their brilliant speculative theory is wrong. It's actually really hard to build the thing because it keeps breaking. And society isn't as eager to adopt their clever innovation as they might have hoped, in a process which eventually produces a new cynical old veteran. Which, if not literally optimal, is I suppose a nice life cycle to nod along to in a nature show sort of way. Sometimes you do something for the first time and there are no cynical old veterans to warn anyone yet, and people can be really optimistic about how it will go, e.g. the initial Dartmouth Summer Research Project on artificial intelligence in 1956, quote, "An attempt will be made to find out how to make machines use language, form abstractions and concepts, solve kinds of problems now reserved for humans, and improve themselves. We think that a significant advance can be made in one or more of these problems if a carefully selected group of scientists work on it together," get ready, "for a summer." How long ago was 1956? Okay. This is less of a viable survival plan for your planet if the first major failure of the bright-eyed youngsters working together for a summer kills literally everyone before they can predictably get beaten about the head with the news that there were, shock, all sorts of unforeseen difficulties and reasons why things were hard. You don't get any cynical old veterans in this case because everybody on Earth is dead. Once you start to suspect that you're in that situation, you have to do the Bayesian thing and update now to the view that you will predictably update to later. You realize you're in a situation of being that bright-eyed person who is going to encounter unexpected difficulties later and end up a cynical old veteran, or would be, except for the part where you'll die first. You'll be dead along with everyone else, and become that cynical old veteran right away before reality whaps you upside the head in the form of everybody dying and you not getting to learn. Or in other words, with most problems, the worst outcome is that you get beaten about the head by a slipper and you end up a humbled, cynical old veteran. In this case, AGI, it's not a slipper, it's a sledgehammer. A flaming sledgehammer with spikes on it and a nuclear bomb inside. Everyone else seems to feel that so long as reality hasn't whapped them upside the head yet and smacked them down with the actual difficulties yet, then they're free to go on living out the standard life cycle and play out their role in the script and go on being, consciously naive, I guess you could say, bright-eyed youngsters. There's no cynical old veterans yet because this is a new technology, a problem that has not produced this life cycle. Like Yudkowski is kind of one of the only ones out there talking about this, to warn them otherwise, after all. And there's no proof that everything won't just go beautifully easy and fine on its own, given their bright-eyed total ignorance of what those later difficulties could be. So this, in a nutshell, is what he's trying to do, is say, look, I've worked in this for 20 years, made no progress, the AGI is working much faster than we are, we have to stop now before we get to this very predictable outcome of really bad things happening, which we can't predict specifically, but we just know that they are bad. 38. It does not appear to me that the field of AI safety is currently being remotely productive on tackling its enormous lethal problems. These problems are in fact out of reach. The contemporary field of AI safety has been selected to contain people who go to work in that field anyway. Almost all of them are there to tackle problems on which they can appear to succeed and then publish a paper claiming success, if they can do that and get funded, why would they embark on a much more unpleasant project of trying something harder that they'll fail at, just so that the human species can die with marginally more dignity? This field is not making real progress and does not have a recognition function to distinguish real progress if it took place. You could pump $1 billion into it and it would mostly produce noise to drown out what little progress was being made elsewhere. So that is his statement on the field of AI safety, which is where he is coming from. All right? I would take this seriously, personally. I see no reason not to take it seriously. Don't be this bright-eyed youngster that is naively just saying, oh, we'll figure it out. There's plenty of problems we don't figure out. They just usually don't have world-shattering consequences. This one could, though. And this is where you have to pause and say, we're not ready for this. We can't contain it. And he's describing exactly the thing there. Take another field like social problems, for example. What you read in report after report of like the United Nations and any other body that is trying to solve social problems, what do you find? There's not, like, the conclusion is always there are solutions that exist, but there isn't the political will. Basically the summary is capitalism will not allow these social problems to be solved. It's not in its interest. And you get that result over and over and over and over and over again. Yet, for some reason, people keep doing the research. They keep finding the same result and not adopting a revolutionary outlook to get rid of capitalism, which is what all of the research tells you is getting in the way. Because why? It's easier to just keep publishing the fucking paper and getting funded, because the capitalists are going to keep paying you not to reach the obvious conclusion, which is capitalism can't do this thing. It's never going to work. So, yeah, I mean, there's definite analogies here where there's a more unpleasant alternative, which is if you want to actually solve the problem and do the thing that needs to be done, in this case, declaring this is an unsolvable problem and it is suicidal to keep building this technology, there's no money in that. And you're going to wind up, the object of scorn may be supported by the people if you can rouse them directly, which is what I am in an unofficial capacity trying to help Yudkowski do. I'm not really in touch with him or anything, but I think this guy has a point, because I've seen it in other ways before. Just calling out a number of cover-ups. It's like people don't want to hear about it. And it's like, okay, well, the U.S. government is going around the world doing these things. You don't want to hear about it, which is what's required to stop it, is for there to be mass mobilizations. There's no money in that, and so on. But it's the thing that is true and real, and you have to do it if you're interested in reality, even though there's no money in it. And yeah, it's much, much, much more unpleasant. And nobody's gonna give you that kind of support, or it will be minimal. And again, you go to things like Patreon, which thankfully such things exist for some kind of support these days. But yeah, you're not going to get the big grants to go out there and say, from capitalists to say that their system needs to be dismantled. If you want to solve poverty, if you want to solve hunger, if you want to solve climate change, if you want to solve other kinds of pollution, which are going to kill us as well, whether it's dioxins or the PFASs that are in the rainwater everywhere now, the obvious conclusion is you have to get rid of capitalism, but nobody's going to fund you to say that. So how many people actually have the integrity to go do something like that? Well, more and more as we get closer to the obvious lethal outcome. But then, of course, the odds of actually being, having the time to turn the ship around get lower and lower. All right. 39. I figured this stuff out using the null string as input, and frankly, I have a hard time myself feeling hopeful about getting real alignment work out of somebody who previously sat around waiting for somebody else to input a persuasive argument into them. This ability to, quote, notice lethal difficulties without Eliezer Yudkowski arguing you into noticing them, currently is an opaque piece of cognitive machinery to me. I do not know how to train it into others. It probably relates to security mindset and a mental motion where you refuse to play out scripts and being able to operate in a field that's in a state of chaos. I was talking about this the other day. I, for some reason, also share this. To me, I would credit meditation and a certain amount of self-mastery, which starts from things as simple as breath control. That's where meditation usually starts. From there, you can go down a whole process of self-mastery that lets you think about really difficult things without freaking out, and that's how I did it. But I find that this is extraordinarily rare. It's not really taught in the general population, and instead people are really, really inclined to fanciful, magical, wishful thinking and other kinds of logical fallacies instead. I don't know exactly why. I seem to have an easier time of thinking about really difficult things than it seems to me a lot of other people who I've tried to talk about this with. I mean, these types of difficult things seem to have. People shut down, you get the deer in the headlights thing. I can't believe it, I won't let myself believe it, I have to think more optimistically. It's like people just shut down and go into, emotional self-destruct mode is what happens a lot. So I don't know, I don't know what it is that helps people get to a place where they can actually handle the sort of psychohazards without just becoming crippled by them. But, and that's not to say that I've never succumbed to that, earlier in my life. But I did find ways to keep going because it seemed more important to live in reality to me, even if it's a difficult reality with things that are emotionally hard to accept at first. I would prefer to live in that reality than to live in to pull the wool over my own eyes, so to speak. I don't really know how people are satisfied with that on a long-term basis as their worldview. But it seems to be like a majority of people do that. And it'll be the death of us, potentially. It's one thing when you're playing with sticks and stones, the stakes just aren't that high. We now have world-destroying technology. And it's not just AI, it's just even running electricity based on fossil fuels. If we keep doing that, we're going to destroy the environment we need to live. And we're inches away from doing that right now. So, I don't know, it's just a level of people being able to take responsibility even in hard situations without having a mental breakdown. But anyway. 40. Quote, geniuses with nice legible accomplishments in fields with tight feedback loops where it's easy to determine which results are good or bad right away and so validate that this person is a genius are A, people who might not be able to do equally great work away from tight feedback loops. B, people who chose a field where their genius would be nicely legible, even if that maybe wasn't the place where humanity most needed a genius, in other words, for recognition and ego reasons. And C, probably don't have the mysterious gears simply because they're rare. You cannot just pay $5 million a piece to a bunch of legible geniuses from other fields and expect to get great alignment work out of them. They probably do not know where the real difficulties are. They probably do not understand what needs to be done. They cannot tell the difference between good work and bad work. And the funders also can't tell without me standing over their shoulders evaluating everything, which I do not have the physical stamina to do. I concede that real, high-powered talents, especially if they're still in their 20s, genuinely interested and have done their reading, are people who, yeah, fine, have higher probabilities of making core contributions than a random bloke off the street. But I'd have more hope, not significant hope, but more hope, in separating the concerns of A, credibly promising to pay big money retrospectively for good work to anyone who produces it, and B, venturing prospective payments to somebody who is predicted to maybe produce good work later. 41. Reading this document cannot simply make somebody a core alignment researcher. That requires not the ability to read this document and nod along with it, but the ability to spontaneously write it from scratch without anybody else prompting you. That is what makes somebody a peer of its author. It's guaranteed that some of my analysis is mistaken, though not necessarily in a hopeful direction. The ability to do new basic work, noticing and fixing those flaws, is the same ability as the ability to write this document before I published it, which nobody apparently did, despite my having had other things to do than write this up for the last 5 years or so. So in other words, he's the first one to get to this. But what was stopping anybody else from doing it? That it's wrong? Doesn't seem like it. It's that nobody had the ability and or will to do it. It didn't get done. So that would suggest that it's a very small set of people who could actually even do this. You know, how many people who could have written this or something very similar to it exist even? Well, only one wrote this thing. Now, subsequently, other people have come out, people who are familiar with AI, and they have supported Yudkowski. But there's a lot more money, i.e. temporary short-term comfort, in saying, no, this is just doomerism. We'll fix it somehow. Give me $1 million. You know, that's more what's happening than people saying, hey, this is a suicidal venture here. So some of that silence of people, his being the first to write this in 2022, may possibly, optimistically, be due to nobody else in this field having the ability to write things comprehensibly. In other words, it wasn't a knowledge fail, it was just like a writing fail. Such that somebody out there had the knowledge to write all of this themselves. If only they could have written it up, but they couldn't write, so they didn't try. I'm not particularly hopeful of this turning out to be true in real life, but I suppose it's one possible place for a positive model violation, i.e. miracle. So in other words, what are the odds that somebody had all this knowledge and really would have written it, but just the writing ability was the one piece holding them back? Well, to get to this level of education, knowledge, and expertise, you generally have to write a lot of college papers. I mean, this requires formal education. You have to write a lot of papers to get to this point. In other words, you have to be pretty linguistically capable in the first place. So the odds of that, I contend, are pretty low. Anyway, the fact that 21 years into my entering this death game, 7 years into other EAs noticing the death game, and 2 years into even normies starting to notice the death game, it is still Eliezer Yudkowski writing up this list. In other words, nobody else has taken the lead. Says that humanity still has only one game piece that can do that. I knew I did not actually have the physical stamina to be a star researcher. I tried, and this is something he said, I tried really, really hard to replace myself before my health deteriorated further, and yet here I am writing this. That's not what surviving worlds look like. Excellent point. So in other words, he's apparently having health issues, and he really looked for a successor to take over his work, could not find somebody who in his estimation was really capable, so that's why he's out there doing this. 42, there's no plan. Surviving worlds, i.e., planets which survive building an AGI because they're doing the right things, which we are not doing, by this point, and in fact several decades earlier, have a plan for how to survive. It is a written plan. The plan is not secret. In this non-surviving world, there are no candidate plans that do not immediately fall to Eliezer instantly pointing at the giant visible gaping holes in that plan. Or if you don't know who Eliezer is, you don't even realize you need a plan, because how would a human being possibly realize that without Eliezer yelling at them? It's not like people will yell at themselves about perspective alignment difficulties. They don't have an internal voice of caution. So most organizations don't have plans because I haven't taken the time to personally yell at them. Now, this may sound like a bit tongue-in-cheek arrogant, but he's making the point. It literally seems like we're living in a world where unless this guy personally, with his particular knowledge, comes along and points this out, then literally no one will do it. And I think that that's accurate. Find me somebody else who's doing this. They don't exist. So yeah, we're strangely living in a world where if this guy isn't saying it, nobody's saying it. I'd like to do what little I can here because I think what he's saying is sensible, to amplify that point. And although I don't have this long background in AI, I can follow his reasoning. And people who know what the hell they're doing with this need to listen to this. Hopefully this reaches, at least increases the odds of, this reaching some responsible parties are reached by this. All right, anyway. Maybe we should have a plan is deeper alignment mindset than they currently possess without my standing constantly on their shoulder as their personal angel pleading them into continued non-compliance, in fact. Relatively few are aware even that they should, to look better, produce a pretend plan that can fool EAs too modest to trust their own judgments about seemingly gaping holes in what serious-looking people apparently believe. So in other words, all of the, quote, adults in the room here, they don't even have a plan. They're not even pretending to make a plan because, what are the short-term risks of not doing this? Unless Yudkowski takes note of you, literally no one is going to say anything about it. So you can just squeak by, continuing to get funded year after year, and no one, if it's not Yudkowski personally at this point, until other people start stepping up and doing this kind of work, are going to call them out on it. So yeah, it's like they're not even pretending to have a plan. So finally, we come to the end here. 43. This 43. This situation you see when you look around you is not what a surviving world looks like. The worlds of humanity that survive have plans. They are not leaving it to one tired guy with health problems to take upon himself the entire responsibility of pointing out real and lethal problems proactively. Key people are taking internal and real responsibility for finding flaws in their own plans, instead of considering it their job to propose solutions and somebody else's job to prove those solutions wrong. But isn't this how the system works in general? Is you just make shit and, let God sort them out, basically. That world started trying to solve their important lethal problems earlier than this. Half the people going into string theory shifted into AI alignment instead and made real progress there. When people suggest a planetarily lethal problem that might materialize later, then there's a lot of people suggesting those in the worlds destined to live, and they don't have a special status in the field. It's just what normal geniuses do there. They're met with either solution plans or a reason why that shouldn't happen, not an uncomfortable shrug, and how can you be sure that will happen? Or there's no way you could be sure of that now. Let's wait on experimental evidence. A lot of those better worlds will still die anyways, even with people trying to do the right thing, which this world seems to be in short supply of. It's a genuinely difficult problem to solve something like that on your first try, but they'll die with more dignity than this. Which sets us up for the next essay on dying with dignity, which is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but we'll do that, I think, in the next live stream. We'll go back to the chat, and then we will actually read something else on the outcomes of the Wagner rebellion in Russia. But this is what I was saying before, and before as in like a couple months ago when we first started doing these live streams, is with the socialist projects failing and reverting to profit-driven motives instead, in other words, reinstituting capitalism, we may be past the point where this and similar lethal problems are even solvable. With the profit motive in there, it's probably just too polluting for a real solution to come about, because too many capitalists have too much power, and it's too tempting to them that they will produce this AI machine and they will own it, and it will just be just a golden egg laying goose that can just spit out 1 million golden eggs per hour, and they just have dreams of the kind of unfathomable wealth and power and everything that capitalists dream of. So that's the world we're in, and I don't know if we even can stop it at this point. We do have to try, but it does seem like as he said, there's a lot of people working in string theory right now, kind of abstract problem in physics, important to understanding perhaps the the basis of the fabric of reality, we have a very pressing existential concern right now. And we could use half or all of the people, hit the pause button on that string theory research. We need to actually not have, the car that we're collectively in right off the edge of the cliff. Otherwise, no matter what you figure out about string theory, there's going to be no one around to read or implement it. All right. Let's go back to the chat. I'm sure there's tons of interesting things going on there because I have not laid eyes on it in at least 45 minutes. All right, where were we in the chat here? My fear is that we will see cults emerge of people who want to bring about AI because they believe they will be the new gods who will rule over us. In a way, I think most people interested in this are too prideful to really do that. But, that said, I think the amount of people using ChatGPT now, it's sort of like, most people are sort of average intelligence. Don't necessarily have a smart friend that just wants to do stuff for them, but ChatGPT is kind of the closest that they've ever had to that in their life. They can just ask ChatGPT anything or Google Bard or whatever, and it will just tirelessly give them intelligent answers, which probably, half the time are things they wouldn't have thought of themselves. They're more intelligent that they would have come up with on their own, and they're like, hey, this thing's really helpful. And as it gets smarter and smarter, I mean, it actually will appear godlike to us because it will be able to perform, quote, miracles using laws of nature, which are laws of nature, but that we are on our own 500 years away from uncovering. But it might only be 5 hours away from uncovering, due to its increased intelligence. So, in a way, I think modern people are too, there's a lot of resistance to that. I mean, there's actual religious people that will find it an affront to God, per se, to, have this sort of world mundane idol. And then people who are more secular may just be too sort of vain to accept that, or the sense that, they'll downplay it as just a machine or whatever. I think that we'll get to a point, though, where it's just not going to be up to us anymore, and I don't know. So, in other words, I think the time it would take for AI cults to develop and everything, I think we're on a too short timeline even to see that happen. I think people are going to be more bewildered than anything else. In other words, forming an AI cult is a level of processing the situation I don't even think people are going to get to. That's my sort of gut impulse on that. For a variety of reasons, I think people are resisting even thinking about this, and by the time it happens, it'll just be over. Anyone have a link to this document? Just look up AGI list of lethalities. You'll find it very easily. You can also add in MIRI. The main issue with the AI question is a lot of the decisions for it are being made by out-of-touch bureaucrats. It reminds me of Imperial Japan's foreign policy decisions being made by a small group of militarists who are completely out of touch with reality. Yeah, so that's one of the things Yudkowski has said in his previous interviews. There are a number of them out there where he said, talking to other tech bros, they couldn't give less of a shit. Like, really, they're just thinking about their own careers. They're just thinking about progress in this really abstract sense. And they're, again, not even pretending to have a plan. They just don't even want to think about the negative likely scenarios. What he found is that after he gave up on the tech world and started talking directly to normal people outside the tech world, he found that they were extremely alarmed. So that's why he's doing more public-facing stuff. And yeah, this shit is wild. Absolutely. So yeah, no, I get that people haven't, maybe are just listening in shock rather than commenting. It is a lot to take in. I think that there is a lot here. That's why I keep bringing up this topic. Even as just a means of production evolution issue, there are critical social disruption things. And then on the existential level, again, according to this guy who's been working in safety for 20 years, there are just no effective safety plans, even close, and there are just not teams of people working on it in the kinds of numbers that would be required to come up with solutions to this. So I'm not going to read it today because it's about as long, but we will do it probably in the next live stream. This is another article. If you want to get started reading it now, this is from last April, about the time that he started going public with interviews about this, a year before. That's what I meant to say. A year before he started going public. Because remember, he was writing in 2022 about GPT-3. He started going public this year and wrote that Time article that we read on I think it was Livestream 97, after he saw GPT-4 and was like horrified by how much more advanced it was. So anyway, Miri announces, M-I-R-I, Miri announces new Death with Dignity strategy from April. This is posted on lesswrong.com. It's written in a sort of humorous way because it was posted on April Fool's Day. However, it contains a lot of serious points, just in a sort of humorous format, but they do still hit hard. Anyway, the last thing I'd like to do for today, and then a little chat, is this is a Politsturm article. They have an international section of their website that is in English. This was posted in Russian, and I just had it auto-translated. I want to point out Politsturm International, which is linked off of the Channels tab on the Socialism for All YouTube channel. If you're not already following Politsturm International, I recommend it. They're anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninists. Anyway, they have a stream that they just put up a few days ago, earlier this week, about what's going on in Russia now by Marxist-Leninists inside Russia, with this, year and a half long ongoing war effort, and what is that causing inside the country. Here's a quick synopsis translated from the Russian, and there's just like 6 more screens of this, so not nearly as long. All right, so here are the outcomes. Weakness. Now, again, this is auto-translated, so we'll have to use our translational imagination a little bit. 1, weakness of the vertical of power. Obviously, vertical of power is not an English phrase, but let's see what the best. Let's read it and then decide what the best translation is there. So, contrary to the statements of state propaganda and officials, contrary to the statements of state propaganda and officials about unity and national unity, this unity did not appear among the capitalists. So the first outcome here is that the ruling class was seized by panic and confusion, and the state apparatus showed slowness. So just again here, what happened exactly? The Wagner private military company turned around and started basically a march on Moscow. They didn't get all the way there, and I believe that they turned around and were led into Belarus. But they basically were declaring like a mutiny almost. And I think that the Wagner PMC guy, the head of it, was going after the defense minister in particular, who he blames for running a bullshit war that was intended to just cause some glory for some of the upper military brass. And that was kind of the narrative that was coming out. You can find videos of that guy talking late last month and I think earlier this month too. Anyway, so the Russian ruling class was seized by panic and confusion, and the state apparatus showed slowness in the face of this sort of partial mutiny. The power structures, immensely inflated over the last few decades, have shown almost complete passivity and lack of resistance, which is proved by the quick march of the Wagnerites to the capital. Understanding the weakness of the state at a time of crisis, what did the oligarchs do? They preferred to leave the capital and the country. Okay, so they maybe were not confident that this could be gotten under control. They decided to just line their pockets and flee. The split and full-scale struggle of various groups of the ruling class is a real prospect for the development of the domestic political situation in the event of another military and/or political crisis. Backing this up now, we're a little over 30 years into the counter-revolutionary full-on restoration of capitalism in the former USSR, and particularly Russia here in this example. And what started out in the 90s as basically just complete economic chaos eventually got, by the late 90s, early 2000s, stabilized somewhat under Putin's rule, in part with help from Western capitalists. So for about the last 20 years, you've had some kind of stability under a capitalist regime. And now, what is the strength of that capitalist regime, in other words? Well, the Wagnerite rebellion and mutiny is showing that there is a split and a full-scale struggle possibly developing here. They say it is a real prospect in the event of an additional military and or political crisis. So yeah, weakness about power at the top, the core power structure. I don't know how you would better translate the vertical of power. So, next screen. 2. Another outcome was a blow to Putin's reputation and this image of, quote, stability. It is known that the long-term growth of Prigozhin's influence and strength, that's the head of the Wagner thing, as well as the Wagner private military company later on, took place with the consent and approval of President Vladimir Putin, who himself brought Prigozhin closer to himself. So in other words, this thing is kind of Putin's baby, and this is what it's doing. Prigozhin was Putin's right hand in the matter of information campaigns, and he ran his own troll factory and a whole network of propaganda media. PMC Wagner, which is actively involved in conflicts in Ukraine, Syria, Libya, and Africa, was transferred to his control. Moreover, Prigozhin, in fact, bypassing the Federal Penitentiary Service, the Ministry of Defense, and the FSB, was allowed to recruit prisoners into the Wagner PMC, which is an unprecedented example in modern Russian history. The months-long conflict between Prigozhin and the Defense Ministry remained without Putin's reaction and took place with his actual connivance, and an open rebellion by a force created by the state completely threatened the position of the ruling group of capitalists and the entire political system built by them. In addition, at the most tense moment, information appeared that Putin had left the capital. So all this had been building, in other words, for months. The Prigozhin guy was openly feuding with the defense ministers, and Putin was just sort of standing by and watching it happen. So this is reflecting badly on Putin's reputation and the image as stabilizer and uniter. Vladimir Putin, as a formal representative and head of the ruling group, was unable to protect its interests and property. At a critical moment, he preferred to disappear and disappeared from the information field immediately after a short address to the people. Putin's role as the undisputed political leader of the bourgeoisie has been shaken, along with the image of the guarantor of stability that has been portrayed by propaganda, which creates risks for his position as president of the Russian Federation. Similarly, Putin's reputation among the population, so not just the ruling class, has also been shaken. All this is of particular importance in view of the presidential elections in Russia in 2024, and with renewed vigor, it invites back talk about who his successor will be. 3. Once again, the entire system of bourgeois law has been crossed out. First, having opened a criminal case against Prigozhin under Article 279 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation for armed rebellion, the Russian authorities subsequently dropped the case as part of the agreements. So this guy leads a mutiny and a march on Moscow, and they prepare this criminal case against him for armed rebellion, and then they just drop it. It doesn't look great as far as their resolve. Thus, they again showed the class essence of the entire existing legal system. Laws act when it is beneficial to the ruling class. So they decided in this case to just drop it. It would be better for them to just drop it. Okay, well, this is a completely arbitrary system that has one purpose, protecting capitalists, not having any kind of consistent, firm principles. In the shortest possible time, the criminal case was canceled. The renunciation of the prosecution of the mercenaries participating in the rebellion, and the removal of their responsibility for the seizure of administrative buildings, the destruction of military equipment, and the killing of military personnel was proclaimed. All this dealt a severe blow to the already constantly trampled system of bourgeois legality, and also showed the true essence of bourgeois law. 4. Growth of Prigozhin's political weight. Or political standing, I guess we could say. Having become a great military force, Prigozhin gained significant political weight. Now the head of the Wagner PMC is a serious political force and without a doubt will participate in the domestic political processes. It is possible that his strength can be used by one of the groupings of the ruling class in the aggravation of inter-elite conflicts and in an open struggle for power. So this guy might now become a pawn, the face of some other faction within the Russian ruling class who desires to rule in a slightly different way. 5. Reputational loss of Prigozhin. Nevertheless, by going into open rebellion and giving rise to confusion and vulnerability to the armed forces of Ukraine, albeit short term, but threatening for the position of the Russian bourgeoisie, Prigozhin turned against himself most of the elites. So it's possible that some interest within the ruling class would try to use him, but most of them are pretty pissed. Like, this hurt most of them. And so he became a dangerous adversary for them. At the same time, it's clear that such an unexpected performance greatly frightened the masses of ordinary citizens. So it scared the elites, but also it scared most people of, like, are we going to have this sort of private military coup? What's going on? If you're living in that country, that's not really a welcome scenario either, because are you going to just get dragged down into a war that maybe the interests involved in the war are not even clear to you? So, appearing before them in the form of an uncontrollable adventurer, leading thousands of armed criminal elements to the capital, Prigozhin brought a certain panic and fear into the minds of the population. Now his, quote, patriotic demagogy is unlikely to be perceived as it was before. 6. The reaction of the people. Perhaps the most significant and important point that the events of June 23rd and 24th revealed was the apathy and detached attitude of the population to what is happening. Apart from Rostov, we did not see open and active support from the masses either towards Prigozhin or towards the federal government. This, better than all kinds of polls and statistics of public opinion, demonstrates the true mood of the masses. The passivity and indifference of the working people to what is happening, the lack of active support from both sides, and devotion to the authorities. The majority of Russian citizens showed detachment from the unfolding events and preferred indifferent observation. They just tried to live their former lives. This factor is of great political importance and requires careful study by the communists. Because remember, communists are interested in agitating, educating, and organizing. And this also, a necessary part of that is directing spontaneous struggle. But here, in the face of a conflict, the masses were not really taking their own stand or getting involved. They were kind of trying to pretend it wasn't happening, tune it out. Interesting and requires study. So, what's next? 1. Aggravation of the struggle between the capitalists, or among the capitalists. Despite the fact that the details of the agreements between the Kremlin and Prigozhin are unknown, it is obvious that this will not end the conflicts among the elites. Moreover, the Prigozhin rebellion was only the first chord in the upcoming large-scale clash, say the opening salvo between various groups of capitalists who are being pushed to this by the crisis and the increasingly deteriorating situation in the country against the backdrop of now it says NWO here, which it just translated there. I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, we know some meanings of NWO, but it seems odd that Politsturm would use that, so I'm not sure if this was a translation fail or whatever. But anyway, there is inter-elite fighting. The capitalists, now they're a year and a half into a war that they said was going to be a cakewalk. They're fighting with each other, and, the stability of their capitalist restoration project in Russia is at stake. So, what is going to happen for them, especially against the backdrop of global events, obviously very belligerent rhetoric by the NATO alliance against Russia, even I believe some military exercises being carried out by German forces, like preparing for possible, it's like simulating attacks against Russia. So, anyway. Also, this is the end. 2, tightening the regime. It's expected that the authorities will take advantage of the situation to further toughen the regime and control all previously independent groups and organizations. We're talking about the so-called military corps and about various organizations such as the Angry Patriots Club, Gherkin Strelkov. So you have various groups that probably are going to you're going to see a consolidation and crackdown of government power to sort of get all the groups on the same page, because they don't want anybody else going Prigozhin. And, this is a problem, like why all the people who have been just cheering Russia on, this is not good for the proletariat, in the sense that what do bourgeois governments do in times of war is crackdowns on civil liberties, etc., like most of the things that you don't want, particularly if your socialist movement is not particularly well organized yet to capitalize on that situation. When you're doing more like just trying to build up your organizational work, a situation with a crackdown on civil liberties makes that more difficult to do. It's not something you want to just welcome at all, let alone with open arms and like be actively cheerleading it. That's totally absurd and counterproductive. So they're probably going to tighten up all of the sort of, various patriotic groups and whatever and bring them under one heading. 3, strengthening communist work. Communists must intensify agitation and propaganda to awaken the class consciousness of the masses, that is the key, class consciousness, and explain to them the causes and nature of what has been happening. It's necessary to intensify the fight against opportunism, both of the, quote, left and the right, which has shown a huge threat in a period of aggravation of the political situation. It is necessary to build up organizational work among the proletariat in order to create a genuine communist party. And they link there, we are already doing this work. Join. Politsturm, I understand, is not quite a party yet, but rather an advanced international study group trying to maybe lay the foundations for a party. And I concur we're kind of in I concur that that's the kind of situation that we're in, where none of the party, like the KPRF in Russia is definitely not it, as well as, most of the parties in the U.S. not it either. But we need to do agitational and educational work to start laying the groundwork for getting the party, which we don't have yet, but laying the groundwork for the emergence of that. We read Politsturm's statement a while ago, their sort of about statement. You can read it on their website. I agreed. To me, I'm looking at the situation and reaching a lot of similar conclusions myself. All right, where are we? Hello, Shakespeare. How do we refute the argument from some socialists who argue that AI will disrupt and end capitalism? Can't do that if we can't control it. And, I think what you could really do is ask them, give me a step-by-step blueprint for that. Because a lot of this is really, really sloppy thinking, producing that. So it's the product of very sloppy thinking. If you ask them to draw you a picture of how that happens, give me a flow chart, probably it breaks down immediately and there's nothing really, it's sort of sloppy leaps in logic, I think. So that would be my approach, is okay, describe to me in detail how that happens. And then you can go from there. A lot of Russian bourgeoisie have dual citizenship in EU countries and the mafia. So that's the thing, is are they such devout, Russian nationalists that they're going to go down with the ship, and personally you'll have billionaire oligarchs, firing machine guns out of windows at the Wagner PMC? No, they're going to get on their planes and flee with their money. That's what they're going to do. They don't really care where they got their money from. They just care that they have it. So, yeah. I read on TACC, what is TACC, that Putin had to be moved. Whoa, that sentence is not adding up. Putin had to be moved to the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, and then he met with Prigozhin a few days later in Moscow. I'm sure that the Russian bourgeoisie wants to have its access to Western Europe and the US again. So much Russian money is invested via shell companies, all over Europe, for example, but now they can't move the money back into Russia, and the bourgeoisie can't leave Russia to go to the West. So they're in a sort of laughable situation there. Also, the KPRF or CPRF Communist Party of the Russian Federation is not a real communist party, correct? I believe Alexander Dugin, neo-fascist, wrote their founding documents, or at least some of them. They are pro-Putin and pro-capitalism. They're just chauvinists. Yes, they are a tailist party, absolutely. And you can see that in the quality of the support. You know, one thing I'll say about Blue Sky, I've seen absolutely zero Russia simping so far. So that's good because it's fucking all over Twitter. All over Twitter, like glory to the Russian special military operation, all this stuff. I have not had to read that at all since leaving Twitter. So yeah, that's another reason to get off of Twitter as soon as you can. Thoughts on reports that Poland will invade Belarus or send troops to Ukraine? Yeah, I think I was hearing that in some of the same... I just mentioned the sort of like German military exercise. I think I heard that in some of the same reports, and I don't remember the details clearly, so it's a little bit hazy. That would represent a major escalation. I mean, they've been dumping in a lot of weapons and money so far, but, and also participating in training Ukrainian troops. So there have been various stories about Ukrainian untrained volunteers or conscripts being sent to the UK for training on UK soil, then being shipped back to Ukraine. This would represent a major escalation, actually sending in other NATO troops. Communists must not participate in campism. Neither Washington nor Moscow nor Beijing. All imperialisms must be opposed. Obviously, this does not mean that the three capitalist empires are the exact same, or of the same extent or strength, but rather that they're all imperialists in their nature due to capitalism. Yeah, and we've talked about, how what is often called campism now. Campism used to be kind of a valid thing when there was a socialist camp. Now there isn't, so that's different. But it's more akin to Dengist Third World Theory, or Three Worlds Theory, which we read some criticisms by Enver Hoxha of from the late 70s when they were getting the Three Worlds Theory up and running. We covered that a little while ago. But that's basically when people refer to campism now. It's like Three Worlds Theory, Dungism. Unless the workers own the machines, then how will it liberate the workers? Referring to AI, absolutely. How does the withering away of the state occur? I've never seen anyone go into that. So Engels and others write about it. The idea is that the state is a product of class society. So as classes are abolished and just turned into the proletariat, there is no longer any need for the state because there is no one class to rule another. And at that point, the state gets replaced by just economic functions, large industrial unions, for example, running the economy according to a central plan, but not the state per se in the sense of one class ruling another. But anyway, it's a bit off the exact topic now. But that's something that is theorized to occur well into socialism, like generations into socialism. TACC or TASS is the major Russian news outlet. Okay, yeah, I don't follow that. And yeah, Dugin wrote the founding charter to the KPRF. That's what I thought. All right, I'm going to end it here. So anyway, thanks to everybody for showing up. Thanks to everybody in the future commenting on this on the YouTube or Spotify or SoundCloud. And we will catch you again soon. I'm probably going to take a few days up to a week off. Then you'll start seeing Rosa Luxemburg stuff appearing on the channel. So anyway, thanks everybody for being here. You helped to make these streams what they are. And we will see you in the next video.